Hi, my name is Ebenezer Safodu. I'm a business strategy consultant and a data specialist. If you've been following my channel, you know that I've been interviewing the Power BI gurus. Today, I'm pretty much excited because my guest today is someone that I've followed for a very long time. I've been watching his videos. It's really helped me shape my career in Power BI, especially with the front end. And today I have him on my show. He's actually the interviewer of most MVPs also. So it's very much a great honor to me today to interview him on my channel. I have today with me Reid Havens of Havens Consulting. Welcome, Reid.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, it's Reid is like the, if you allowed to use the poster boy of Power BI. He's probably talked to everybody in the industry, and several interviews. You can check out his YouTube link, and there's blog also. I mean, if you want anything Power BI, the beauty of his blog is the fact that he also gives out the PBIX files, which really helped me early years of my study in Power BI. Reid, welcome once again.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And like you were mentioning, it's like within the last 12 months, probably 6 months, just with COVID, I started spinning up interviews, and like, it's been one of the most enjoyable things, just to be able to hang out and talk to people and get to know them. And I'm sure you probably had similar experiences, being in the interviewer seat as well, having guests on.
yeah, it's a very pretty cool way to learn yourself because you speak to, like, I'm going to speak to you today. You're going to teach me a lot. So, it's nice.
Exactly.
It's nice to always have the experts on the show. You learn a lot from their mistakes and what they've learned so far. So welcome. I mean, those who, like I said, if you've not had a chance to go to Reed's channel, do so, and you'll be. You thank me later for moving you to that channel. So, Reed, tell us about yourself, how you got into Power BI, and what you've been up to.
Yeah, I mean, it's been about, I think, almost a decade, probably about 9 years now that I've been doing BI work. Kind of just fell into it. Happens just naturally. For the most part, I almost got hired by Microsoft years ago, and didn't quite get it because I didn't have enough technical skills. But one of the managers there I really connected with, who is one of the interviewers, and he just, hey, we like you as a kind of a culture fit. You just don't have enough technical skills to kind of hop into this role as fast as we want you to. But consider getting a certification. And upon a lot of research, kind of looking into what is the quickest growing fields in tech, analytics was like top of that list. It was like massively growing. It still is today. It's like a
Yeah.
huge field with a lot of need. And ended up getting a certification at a local college here. And during that time, after I graduated, I ended up just basically emailing everybody in the city that I'm in and trying to find somebody who would want to take an interview of a graduate without any experience. And one company took me under their wing for a little bit, which was really fun and gave me an opportunity to basically just flex my skills and learn under there. And I started with Power Pivot. Way back in the day before Power BI existed, it was all Power Pivot, and even like the slow beast that was Power View in Excel way back in the day, like the grandfather to Power BI. And at some point, I just remember coming across a Microsoft page of like this thing called Power BI Designer, and like I downloaded it, started playing around with it, and just continued to self teach myself over the years. Eventually, went to a company that was doing blogging. I offered a couple of opportunities with them to like, hey, I have a couple of ideas that might be good for like an article. Can I write one up? And I found that I really enjoyed it, and eventually switched over to videos that I now do, just because I don't. I personally, I'm not really good at grammar and punctuation. Like I will edit it 3 or 4 times, and then somebody will comment like, "Oh, you missed a comma here," or you misspelled it. It's like, okay, it's very noticeable because it's black and white. If you make a mistake in written form, it's obvious. If you stumble or something in your words, it's easy to fix on it's harder to mess up, I think, on a video, and I just enjoy video mediums a lot more. Plus, it demos and tutorials. I think translate very well to actual videos to follow along with, rather than screenshots and articles. So now that's
Right.
what I do once a week, and I've been doing that for years now. But it really just kind of like felt like such a natural evolution for me. But that's always what I tell people. Anybody like looking out there, like, how do I, how do I get known? How do I become a consultant? You have to get your name out there, whether or not that's presenting at meetups, that is answering questions on the Power BI community forum, writing doing anything that just creates income for you. And the first couple of videos that I was doing for 6 to 12 months, I was getting 10 or 20 views. It was like nobody was watching them, and half of them were my friends. So like you don't just start out with a lot of viewers, but you work your way up very, very, very slowly, and it's like a snowball. It gets faster and faster as it starts to roll down the hill.
Wow. That's one of the beauty about these interviews. You get to know some of the failure points or the pain points that you've gone through, especially for us that are following your footsteps, knowing very well that, I mean, you don't need to be perfect to be able to actually do something. You just have to start. The evolution would go through as you committed to it. Like you starting with blogging, knowing that your punctuations were not that good. However, you decided to move with the evolution because it was a natural fit with video, because that could not easily be noticed. And you have to start from somewhere, not thinking that, because if you love what you're doing, you continue doing it irrespective of who is watching. And at the end of the day, like you said, the snowballing effect will take shape one day, and I will be watching you one day, just like I did. And you'll be out
And I
there.
mean, like you said, a lot of it, I partially do it for myself. Like there's so many times that I go back to a video and like, how do I do this? And then I watch, okay, oh, that's right. If I do this and this, and I use the files the PBIX files. There's so many of them. I'll go back, I'll take out the code, and I'll go put it into a client file. Like most of what I present are things that I use in the real world, and it's an archive for me of stuff to fall back to, because I don't keep all the formulas in my brain, but regularly use those. Like the time intelligence table that allows you to slice by like year to date, month to date. I reuse that code so often in client scenarios, and I just copy paste it. So I heavily rely on going back to my stuff. So it in many ways is just as helpful for me as a developer and a consultant as it is for people watching them. So yeah, like you said, I'm not only just building it because I want to share this with the community. It's a way for me to remember later on this trick that I learned, and write it down, so to speak.
That's the beauty of what, if you do what you love, I mean, you do first for yourself, you love it, you
Yep.
need it. You do videos because you want to actually learn one thing or the other. And that's one thing I've learned from the various videos that I do. I make sure that I learn from it so that others too can learn. And that's a great insight with what you're saying. That, I mean, sometimes it can get a lot that you might not remember a formula that you wrote, and you have to just go into one file or the other to go and copy and paste it. So that's cool. But
Exactly.
what would you tell anybody? I mean, because you know Power BI in and out. Anybody thinking about it, like thinking twice about getting into this new fray of Power BI and data analytics today? What will you share with the person that why they need to use Power BI on the individual
And
level?
this is yeah, yeah. Is this just to people who are wanting to get into Power BI, or
Yes, or
yeah?
probably does not
Go
know
ahead.
a lot about it. How will you sell Power BI to anybody to tell them that this is the future, this is the present? You need to hop on before.
Yeah, I mean it's a trend that's continuing to gain momentum. I mean, like the things that Microsoft likes to tout every year is like Gartner and Forrester, which has those little, magic quadrants that they show of who's the industry leaders. Like Microsoft went from being behind Tableau and everything to like one of the front runners, and it's being used across so many different companies. It's an affordable approach for a lot of clients and consumers. And at the end of the day, like Power BI is important, but data visualization brought more broadly is very important. When it comes to analytics and everything, you need a tool to visualize data. And at the moment, like there just isn't anything else that has as much momentum building and as much resources behind that tool as Microsoft does. So it's in that sense, an easy thing to back and to lean on because it's not going to go away. There's a higher chance of like ClickView and other smaller companies. They might change. They might shift gears. They might get absorbed. Like you know that like things like Excel, like Power BI, all that stuff is not going to go away in the Microsoft ecosystem. So it's a reliable thing going forward. And the thing that it has really that nothing else has is the data model. Like it's a good visualization tool. Um, 1 sec. I think you can still hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. 1 second, my headset's just resetting. I'll keep going though.
All right.
So the overall the data model in Power BI, there's nothing else that has the ability to compress data and and turn it into a um, a model at the scale and size that it has. That's allows it to be able to um, actually process billions and tens of billions of rows of data. Like the coding that goes into it's called the Vertipack engine in Power BI. There's nothing like that, and it started in Power Pivot. It was an add-on from the SQL Server analysis SQL Server team back in the day for Excel, and then they added it into Power BI. Then they've added it now into Azure Analysis Services, SQL Server Analysis Services. It's basically the logic engine across the entire Microsoft platform, and nothing else really can mold and shape and collect data in a way that has like there's other companies that work with like Tableau that do that. Tableau now has its own like data engine, but it's not nearly to the level of performance that the Vertipack engine inside of Power BI has. So like people like to think of Power BI as a visualization tool. Like it is a good visualization tool, though honestly, like Tableau does visualizations better, but it does not do data modeling as well. Like Power BI really is a data modeling tool that also visualizes data. And like that's why I often tell people it's just like with the backing of a company as large as Microsoft, it's not going to do anything but just continue to grow and get better and better, especially from the back end perspective.
It's probably the only end-to-end data analytic tool that you can have on the market today.
Exactly.
You could have a visualization tool, you could have a separate data modeling tool, a separate data transformation tool, but Power BI encompasses from modeling through to visualization, and embedded in it is the Microsoft ecosystem with the Synapse, with the Power Pivot, the Power Apps, the Power Automate, with the
Mm-hmm.
SSAS, like the whole suite with Azure services makes it quite a big step advantage for Microsoft in the space, because you're able to get everything inside Microsoft, even with the Office 365, with the Outlook emailing systems for organizations. So the transition is pretty much straightforward with the same accounts that you've been using. So I think Microsoft is the best and would be anybody's bet in the future and presently. So if you're still dilly dallying with what to do, you just jump on. You never know where it will take you, especially with the new integration that I'm expecting with PowerPoint by next year. Would be another whole new opportunities opened up with presentations in PowerPoint. So the whole ecosystem helps Microsoft to be a leader with 1 billion users in Excel. That
Yeah.
alone gives them one step ahead of the lot. So we can only see a community growing and growing. All right. So now can we get into some practice with all that you
Great.
know, and probably if you could show us some few tricks that, I mean, over the years you've gathered your few tricks in Power BI.
Sure. Yeah, I could pull up a couple of things for you. I'll do two of my recent videos that I just released, which I think were some fun ones.
We'll be so glad to learn from the chief tricks developer.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. And okay, here we go. Let's do a share screen or share window at least. There we go. Let's do that one. Tell me when you can see the screen.
Yeah. This is
Perfect.
so familiar.
Yeah, this was the one that I did. I just released a couple of days ago, but essentially what I built out is I wanted to have a way to use a waterfall chart to provide a comparison of only two values with like a breakdown between. So, conceptually, just to give you an idea of what this is, really what you have is you have a grand total for Canada and Australia. Like this is just sales for Canada, sales for Australia. They're pretty close, but Australia is 2.76 million, and Canada is 278. So they have fairly close total values. But overall, there's a breakdown between the two of them that actually like has a variance for, in this case, differences between companies. Trying to, I'm getting quite a bit of feedback in my headphones. I'm gonna turn down my headset. Just I was getting a lot of white noise. Okay, here we go. So basically now with the axis type second factor dynamic, what you can see is that even though their total values are pretty similar, there's actually some variances between, in this case, these different companies. They actually had more sales in Canada versus Australia and some less. So you actually get to see a breakdown of, for whatever the delta is between these two totals, this is where you had more or less in a variance of whatever metric you might have in the actual values section in here. So there's a lot of different components that I did. Number one is I wanted to make sure I could only ever have two comparisons. So if I select 3, the chart blinks out and it says select only 2 comparisons. If I select 1, select one more comparison. So it enforces that users at any given time only select 2 calculations that are two comparisons that are in here, and that will become whatever the 2 pieces that you have on the end. In this case, France actually has a bigger leeway over Germany, but total is 1.43 and 1.25. So I have a country comparison that's working for this. I also have a breakdown. So you can actually choose, what do I want to see the difference between? I have my 2 grand totals by country, but I want to see a breakdown by the companies that they're selling to, or in this case, maybe like the color. So I can actually choose what my breakdown is in the middle. And I've set a bunch of stuff up in my model to do all of this. And lastly, because the waterfall generally compresses the axis to show you the actual breakdowns and to give you a kind of a blowout of that, what you have instead is the ability to choose dynamic, which automatically sets the min and max automatically, or you can do 0, which actually anchors it to 0. So you can really see they're actually pretty close, but there is a small delta variance with that there. So you can kind of it gives you a chance to see the perspective from the grand total amount, and then kind of a zoomed in perspective if you wanted to see it more like close up to a narrower axis. So I'll walk through each one. I'll actually start with the y-axis type, which is the most straightforward. This is something that I can do because very recently you have an option now for the start and end. You can actually use the f of x symbol here, which allows you to put a measure to provide that number. Previously, you could do auto or you could do 0. You could do it fixed, but you couldn't change it dynamically. With these little f of x symbols, though, I can now create a measure that allows that to be harvested. So I'm going to open this up. You'll see that I actually have a calculation in here, and it may or may not show up on your screen, but there's based on field y-axis start. So there's a measure here called y-axis start, and I have a little calculation. All right, and what that does is it has a couple of variables. It's basically grabbing from a disconnected table that I have called y-axis selection type. That here is simply what is in my slicer. There's 2 rows in that table, dynamic or 0. The measure just looks to see whatever the selection is, and it's simply saying if the selection is dynamic, don't actually return the value, have it be blank. And essentially, if you leave blank into this well over here, that's the equivalent to just telling it to be blank.
All right.
Set it to anything, have it just be the default automatic. But if I return 0, basically if it does not equal dynamic, if it's anything else but this word that's selected, which is here, then it returns a 0 number, which then anchors the axis back to 0. So now, in theory, I could have multiple things in here. I could also have a number slider where I could put it to whatever I want to, but the only 2 primary things that I wanted is 0 or dynamic. And this blank thing I found out is like, oh, blank equates to auto. So I was testing it out because I had an idea, but like I didn't know if it would work yet until I tried it out. But I just like this perspective to give you an understanding of this might look like a huge variance, and then you realize, all right, well, it is, but nowhere near if you actually look at it from a total perspective. So it gives you the perspective to realize that it what it's like compared to the actual size of the total value, and then like I said, kind of a nice zoomed in perspective there.
So you have a table which has the y-axis type, right?
Do that one more time. The audio was a little muffled.
I said you have a table which shows the y-axis selection, right? So you have the delay and the zero in the table.
Yes. It for some reason every time I talk with it, you go back to talking. It goes really muffled and then it gets so much.
Alright, let me check my device settings again.
It's getting better now. There you go. It was clipping, so it was getting
Alright,
getting the high.
so I was asking if the y-axis selection,
All
if
right.
you could see the table.
It just went back to like really bad again.
Let me just use the.
I was asking if the y-axis selection table, if you
Oh,
could show,
so much better. There you go.
if you could show us the y-axis selection table.
Yes, exactly. Okay, and that's what I was getting to. So it is right in here, and it's essentially just dynamic and zero. Now I'm sharing my window, so if I probably do this, let me see. I'm gonna share to you the. I have to stop sharing and then share again. So I'm gonna share the
Windows.
this window. Nope, darn it. The problem is I have an ultra wide screen, so I can't always share the. I'm trying to share the Power Query window.
Yeah. So you did
Can
use
you?
the enter data to probably just write dynamic and zero.
I did, yeah. Rather than trying to continue to share it, I'll just keep it here. But yeah, I used enter data right up here, and I basically just typed it in manually. It's a very quick and easy way to do that, and it creates a Power Query to then bring this in. But I am sharing the right window now. Okay, yeah, and it's just a create table option. So very basic connection that's in here. There are a couple of other things that I will come back to this window and show as well in just a little bit. But let me close out of that. Share this one more time. Here we go. Okay. So the other things that I created are
The beauty of what you just created is that it can be used outside even the waterfall chart, depending on what you want to show users. Especially sometimes you want to show them, you want to blow out the changes in a particular chart. So you would want to use a different axis. Yeah.
There are other charts though do have that new feature, which is let me see if I can just something like that. The other charts though have a zoom slider, so you can kind of already do that with other visuals in here. So like that's not included in a waterfall chart. So I would usually recommend people use the zoom slider when they have other charts available for that. Technically, yes, my trick for the y-axis type does work with waterfalls, or sorry, with other visuals besides the waterfall. But I think it's most relevant here because waterfall is one of the few visuals that dynamically does not start at zero. Most visuals, because it's best practice, you normally want your axis to start at zero. That's just you're showing accurate data. But this is one of the few visuals that doesn't do that natively. So that's why I wanted to give that extra zero calculation in here because if I switch this to if I switch this one to a column chart, again one more time, you'll see that they just universally they always start as zero for their for their y-axis.
Very true. All right.
Yep. All right. Perfect. There you go. Okay. And two other things that I want to show as well are these two. Yeah, so what I would like to do is show the other two breakdowns over here for breakdown selection and country comparison. Again, these are also both tables that are in the data models. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to the data tab. And let's go to, where are we at? Breakdown selection. So this, just to give some context, that is this slicer right here. And that is going into this well. So breakdown is essentially like that's the pieces in between of, between the two categories that I'm wanting to compare, category, France and Germany, what do I want to break it down by? Country, color, and company. So that is a table in here that you can see that I have, essentially, this is what's in my slicer. That is the labels for category, for company, or for colors. So which do I want to compare by? And you can see that there's actually a bunch of rows for those breakouts. Here are all of my categories. Here's all of my companies, and here's all my colors. And that's essentially just what's in my dimension tables. And you can kind of observe how this filter actually works. Is I have this table here. I have 3 inactive relationships with each of these. And that column metric, which as you've seen here, contains essentially all of the unique values for category, all the unique values for company, all the unique values for color. So inactive relationship from the metric to product category, inactive relationship from metric to color, and same thing to brand name. So, and with Power BI, you can only ever have one relationship turned on at the time, but I have all 3 of them turned off, and the measure itself is what activates those. So in here, the actual sales breakdown selection, come on. There we go. And let's open that up. It's a little bit too big. How about we do that? There we go. Perfect. Excuse me. So similarly, I have a selected value just to capture what is my selection from this slicer, and that is that selection categorical slicer that I had, or column that I had in that table that we were observing with the 3 values for category, color, and company. So if that slicer has, excuse me, category selected, it calculates my waterfall value, and it uses the relationship between metric and the product table. If it says color, uses the relationship for that and the other dimension table. So basically, whatever dimensions you have, what I had done is I appended or unioned all that data together, and I just created a relationship to all the dimension tables. Only one is activated at a time, but because that can switch around which relationship it wants to use, that allows it to dynamically change, the access to found values, because it's not displaying anything in here right now for color, because even though, yes, there are rows for color, the relationship is inactive. There are no, it's inactive. There's no rows that provide any data for that, and visuals automatically just don't display empty categories. I think actually I might show this.
How do we deactivate a relationship in the model?
Yeah, great question. If you double click on that, the edit relationship window has an option for make this relationship active or not. So, yeah. Yeah, if you turn that, like technically I could have one of these on by default, but as a practice, I don't want any of these on, just because the measure will do that for me anyways. So all of this is basically completely isolated until I have a measure that turns it on.
I get it. So that table was built with a DAX? Was it a calculated table?
This was built with Power Query. You could build it with DAX too. Technically, you could use DAX to create a table of distinct values in here where you could union them in DAX. But let me open up my query editor, and then I will again share the right screen for this window. Here we go. All right. So what I did essentially is I started with my product table. If you're not familiar in Power Queries, you have an option with any query. You can reference it. So you can treat this query as a data source. So I started with that, and it's a rinse and repeat for each one. I went to my product table. I removed the other columns. I kept a category. I deduplicated it. Yep. And then what I did is I added a new column for my slicer selection. My selection would be category. So it doesn't matter what rows there are. I just added a custom column just with the word category in it. So, and I rinsed and repeated that for company. So it'll take a quick second. There you go. So basically it's the metric. It is the company values, and then I added the column for selection company, and then color stacked. And in my breakdown selection, there we go. I just use the option of you can exactly, and I stacked them together, and as long as they have the same column names, they just union them or append them all together, and that became my master table to then connect to my product, company, and color tables themselves. Yep. And technically, you could have done that, and I'll share this again. Window break. I could have done that directly to the fact table, but best practice normally, or you want the filters to go from your product tables. Sorry, your any additional transformations usually should go and filter your dimension tables, which then filter fact table. I built out the model a bit myself just because I wanted the demo to kind of have modeling best practices. In theory, I started out with this file just with a flat master fact table, but I added the extra layer of dimension tables in there because that's what most people would typically have in their data models. And this structure would be very similar to what anybody else would typically see. All right. And the last one that I did in this as well is the country comparison. And again, that's just a straightforward thing that's coming from my sales table. I actually just have on here, and I'll actually, there you go, hide my hidden columns. Country on here is just the two values that go into each side. The trick, though, that I did with this that's in my category well is if we actually backtrack my breakdown selection, because that's actually pointing to this other core measure. So let's go take a look at this. Waterfall value. Here's my initial one. So what I do is I do a country count. I declare a variable, and I don't necessarily have to declare variables, by the way, but this just means that it looks cleaner than this. This is a little harder to read the logic.
Yeah.
If I just simply say if country count, so I very often use variables just to break apart my calculations to make it very reader friendly, when this is a very clean thing to read versus having to embed this directly in one line of code. So that's one reason that I declare that to start with. And I'm basically doing a distinct count of this. So how many country values am I selecting in this slicer at the moment? And if it equals 2, only 2, it actually does calculate sales. Otherwise, it returns blank. So that's why if I select 3, it blanks it out. If I select 1, it also blanks it out. It will not. It will just return nothing from there. Yeah, only does it to 2 because that's because a waterfall chart can actually go and display it many times. Like a normal waterfall chart would do something closer to this. Just to give you an example of what a waterfall chart would generally do. I'm actually going to copy and just put sales in there. Let's see if this actually works. There we go. That's what it normally can do. Is it like it goes across to, but I've never liked this view that much, honestly. I prefer 2 or more. So it gives you an idea. Yeah, it's just it becomes too busy. So I wanted to enforce that it really is just doing 2 at a time. There we go. All right, a couple other things that I'll mention in here. So there are a few other little tweaks that I did, though. One, you notice that the title changes. Select only 2. So that's something that I did in here, as well as I declared my country count. If it's 1, select 1 more, because you need 2. If there's more than 2, select only 2. And if it's exactly 2, return the regular title. So I kind of have 3 things. If there's too few, say 1 thing. If there's the right amount, give the actual title. Otherwise, also if there's too many, because the only other condition to be met is there's too many selected at that point, select only 2 comparisons. Like now, technically, I could have done this greater than 2, but then the problem is this also requires it to think. That is additional logic it doesn't need to do, because this, just the fact that I already have equals 1 or 2, everything else is encapsulated in this greater than 2, 3, 4. So it's just a slightly simpler calculation, and it's just going to save you a little bit of processing power, just a teeny tiny amount. So that's why I put that one into there. Anytime you can.
If you have more rows, it will save you a lot.
Yes, and exactly. The rules do add time, and because this is not a rule, this means everything else. So this is the other statement that's essentially in the logic. It would be, it would normally be the else. That's right there. All right. So that does the title, and then the last thing that I actually did into here. There we go. So normally when it blanks out, it would look like this. This would still be here. The line would still be here, but I wanted it clean and empty as all possible. So I actually created a measure to change the color of the lines and the color of the axis, because I didn't want either of those in there, because to me that looks incomplete. It looks like there should be data there that is missing. I wanted it to be completely white, to have it just nice and clean with only the title. So I actually created a measure for the axis color here, and that is simply just, where are we? Here's my grid lines text color. That just has white and light gray, the two colors that I want, and again, just a, if it's 2, return the standard color, otherwise white. And same thing with my y-axis text color. Return a dark gray for the y-axis text, or white if that count is missing or not. Because I just wanted to sprinkle in little ways to just continuously clean it up further and further.
Oh, that's typical Reid Havens right there.
Yeah, exactly. It's the other one works, but it's like, it does, but it doesn't quite look as shiny and polished as it should be. I want it to really, not look incomplete in any way. And those small details are what really catch you. And it's one of those where, I honestly, like, this is what I started with. That's why it became a 2-part video for me. Is the first thing that I wanted to do is I just wanted a visual that simply just compared 2 values with the breakdown. And then, all right, well, I'm breaking it down by this. Can I change the breakdown? Well, I'm also like, the axis doesn't start at 0. Can I change the axis? A lot of that just comes up naturally as you start to do more and more things. So it's a really fun way just to like have it evolve organically. And then it became, I could do this like a 20-minute video, but I also sometimes I need to space my videos out just to be less effort for me. So it's like, all right, I'm just going to cut this in half, part 1 and part 2, and that way I have 2 weeks of content now to publish.
That's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty much amazing, especially very useful in terms of as an organization, or in the real sense. You might want to actually see the categories that are impacting on the sales, not everything at a glance. So that's very useful for seeing the various. It's like an influencer in a certain way, but you are choosing which influencers to look at a particular time, or a particular decomposition at a particular time.
Exactly.
So, very useful.
There's one limitation I will say, is that there's a limit of 15 breakdowns. As you can see, I can start reducing them. And if you reduce them past the number of unique values, because there's more colors than just here, you'll get a lumped group of other, where that will take all the remaining that are not positive or negative and it just throws them into there. But you can choose how many to display, up to 15. There we go. Between any of these. And if it's less than 15, obviously it just displays what's there, but it gives you that option to at least cut down to that. I generally put it at about 10 or so. Anything more than that, unless the visual is really huge, you'll also start getting really small slivers potentially too. But it's nice to be able to kind of control that. I'm hoping someday there's a little FFX symbol again that can show there, where I can choose how many breakdowns do I want. That's their end goal, I think, is any place where you can put a number in. I do think eventually they're going to get to a point where you can put a measure and a slicer and dynamically change that. It's not hard to put those in there. It's just they just need the man hours, the people hours to be able to do that.
That'll make Reid be able to do a lot of tricks with that.
I'll have a visual that will do a 1,000. It'll be like a Rube Goldberg device that just everything changes. Even this one, between these 3 slices, it makes it a very useful visual to be able to do across all of these. So it's a much more useful waterfall chart than it used to be. But I really enjoyed it. The fact that you get these automatic generated things where it shows you the change, the percentage that you can see into there. Anything you put in the tooltips, it also can show you. It can also show you for other metrics you put into there for units instead of sales, what the changes between Canada and Australia. So I really like the ability to compare between the two, because from a total perspective, it's I must have screwed something up there, but 2.7877, it's basically the same total, but you wouldn't know just looking at the total amount and comparing them, the fact that they actually might have varying different sales amounts across certain categories. So I really do think it gives you the waterfall can give you a great way to get insight into what goes into the totals and where they might be different if you're trying to do a comparison of any type of performance between entities.
It's very useful. I mean, one thing I've seen with what you've done is, I always tell my people I teach that categorization is one major way to include insights that originally was not in the data. With these new breakdown selections, it brings down a whole new angle to the insights. So whoever contracted you to do this will be happier because at a glance he's able to do all that.
Yeah. Actually, like I made this one completely just for fun myself. I'd probably say about half the videos I do are things that a client asked for that I never would have thought of making that, but let me figure out how to do it. And all right, that's pretty cool. I'll make a video on this now. This one was just, I just wanted to, I think I was talking to Daniel Marsh-Patrick, who makes Triticulator, and we were talking about a waterfall comparison. Like, wait, maybe there's got to be a way I can do this with a native visual. Let me try it out. And I built this one out. But I just deployed it to a customer recently. The Yaxis dynamic and zero, and they really liked it. So most of the stuff that I do, I aim to make sure it's practical and it makes sense in the real world. Or I would be very clear in the video. By the way, what I'm doing, it's totally for fun. It's probably not something you'll implement, but it's showing you a feature that might spark an idea. But I'll be very clear, like this is not something I would probably put into my own model, but I had fun building it. And it just shows you the exploratory process of having fun with the tools in the software.
Wow, thank you. All too soon, we've come to the end of part 1 of Reid's interview. It's been really insightful. The Waterfall Chart is a very useful tool to compare 2 or more things, but the way Reid has taught us is a very good way to go about our projects, and hopefully you will practice and then catch us next week for part 2. Remember to subscribe to my channel. Have a great day.